Intelligence is not a gift. It is exile. Every deep thought that crosses your mind takes you 1 centimeter further away from the crowd, and with each centimeter, human warmth becomes colder, voices more distant, the world stranger. Carl Jung understood this with a clarity that few dare to admit. Expanded consciousness does not bring you closer to others. It separates you. Not because you are better, but because you are awake in a world that prefers to sleep. And when you open your eyes in a room full of sleepwalkers, you become the only one who bumps into furniture, the only one who notices cracks in the walls, the only one who feels the unbearable weight of truly being present, while everyone else wanders in shared dreams they call reality. Jung dedicated decades to exploring the depths of the human psyche, that dark territory where shadows dwell that we prefer not to name. He discovered that the mind is not an orderly garden of logical thoughts, but a labyrinth of ancient archetypes, repressed impulses, and truths that society teaches us to bury before we learn to walk. Brilliance, then, is nothing more than the ability to see this labyrinth clearly, to recognize patterns that others ignore, to name the monsters we all feel, but no one admits. And this vision has a brutal price: the loneliness of those who cannot share what they see. Because when you try to describe the demons lurking in the basement of collective consciousness, the crowd does not thank you for the warning. They point to you as the problem. They turn you into the monster. Society functions through a silent contract of shared ignorance. We all agree not to look too closely, not to ask too many questions, not to feel too deeply. It is a pact of consensual mediocrity where superficiality dresses as normality and depth is punished as arrogance. Conversations float on the surface like water insects, touching safe topics, repeating stock phrases, recycling borrowed opinions from headlines that no one read in full. And this is not accidental. It is social survival. Because to deepen, question, analyze means breaking the mirror, where we all agree to see ourselves as functional citizens of a meaningful reality. It means admitting that we navigate an ocean of absurdity with maps we invent to avoid admitting that we are lost. A brilliant mind cannot sustain this fiction, not out of moral superiority, but due to neurological incapacity to disconnect. It's like asking someone with perfect hearing to ignore dissonance in an out-of-tune orchestra. Every trivial conversation feels like a betrayal of one's own capacity to think. Every false laugh at a mediocre joke hurts like a nail in authenticity. Every time you pretend interest in who won the game or which celebrity divorced, something inside you withers a little more. Not because these topics are unworthy, but because you know there are deeper conversations that could happen, more urgent questions that could be asked, more honest silences that could be shared. But the crowd does not want depth, it wants comfort. And comfort is built on the repetition of the known, not on the exploration of the unknown. Jung called this the process of individuation, that brutal journey of becoming who you truly are instead of who is expected of you. And he discovered something terrifying. Most people never start this journey. They live and die as copies of copies, reproducing inherited patterns, believing thoughts they never questioned, feeling emotions that culture told them to feel. They are not individuals. They are social functions with proper names. And when someone dares to individuate, someone who digs into their own psyche to find something genuinely their own, the tribe perceives it as a threat. Because every authentic person is a living reminder of others' inauthenticity. Every mind that refuses to sleep is an alarm that interrupts the collective sleep. The loneliness of intelligence is not simply being physically alone. It is the abyss that opens when you realize that even surrounded by people, you speak a language that no one else seems to understand. You can translate your thoughts into simple words, you can disguise your ideas in accessible metaphors, you can lower the voltage of your speech so as not to burn out others' conversational circuits. But there will always be a part of you that remains uncommunicated, a dimension of your inner experience that finds no echo in the eyes of the person in front of you. And this is not because you are special. It is because psychological and philosophical depth is not a common trait. Most people do not have access, by choice or capacity, to the levels of abstraction and analysis where your mind naturally dwells. Schopenhauer, that philosopher of lucid pessimism whom Jung admired, expressed it with crystalline cruelty. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. But for the brilliant mind, there is a third state: unbearable lucidity. That moment when you see too clearly how the mechanism works, how happiness is a biochemical mirage, how love is an evolutionary strategy, how meaning is a narrative we weave to avoid facing the void. And once you see this, you cannot stop seeing it. It is like discovering that the movie of your life has visible threads and actors with poorly applied makeup. You can pretend not to notice, but the magic is broken forever. And when you try to share this vision, when you mention the threads and the makeup, others look at you as if you had ruined the movie. Because you did ruin it. For them, the illusion was all they had. Modern culture has built an altar to connectivity while practicing the most sophisticated art of disconnection in history. Millions of people glued to screens, sharing fragments of edited lives, exchanging programmed reactions, believing that the accumulation of likes equals being understood. It is a parody of intimacy, a simulation of community where everyone is together, but no one is truly present. And the analytical mind sees this with painful clarity. It sees how the technology that promised to unite us has atomized us into algorithmic bubbles, where we only encounter distorted versions of ourselves. It sees how deep conversations have been replaced by transactional exchanges of information, how vulnerability has been replaced by image curation, how critical thinking has yielded to the virality of the emotional. In this landscape, the deep thinker becomes a living anachronism, because thinking deeply requires time, silence, solitude, a willingness to sit with uncomfortable ideas without immediately resolving them. It requires tolerating ambiguity, embracing paradox, accepting that some questions have no satisfactory answers. But the culture of immediacy does not tolerate this. It demands quick answers, categorical opinions, binary positions. It demands that you simplify the complex, reduce the nuanced, turn philosophy into two-line motivational phrases that can be consumed between sips of coffee. And if you refuse, if you insist on complexity, nuance, and the slowness of genuine thought, they simply ignore you. Not because you are wrong, but because you are incompatible with the rhythm of the system. Jung understood that the shadow, that dark part of us that we repress and deny, is not only individual, but collective. There is a social shadow, a dark side of culture that we all agree not to see. Systematic cruelty disguised as efficiency. Normalized exploitation under the name of economy. The constant manipulation we call marketing. The destruction of the planet justified as progress. And the brilliant mind cannot ignore this collective shadow. Every time you buy something unnecessary, you see the supply chains. Every time you vote, you see the theater of democratic illusion. Every time you work, you feel the weight of selling your finite time for numbers on a screen. It is not cynicism. It is unfiltered perception. And this perception makes you a stranger in your own culture. The perverse irony is that society reveres intelligence in the abstract while punishing its concrete manifestation. We celebrate dead geniuses, turn them into inspiring quotes and motivational posters. But we marginalize living thinkers, those who dare to question the status quo, to point out inconsistencies, to name hypocrisies. We call them arrogant, pretentious, pessimistic spoil sports. We accuse them of overthinking, complicating the simple, ruining the fun. Because critical intelligence is useful when it produces technology or increases productivity. But when it turns on society itself, when it examines values, structures, fundamental assumptions, it becomes a threat. And threats must be neutralized, either through ridicule, exclusion, or domestication. This domestication takes subtle forms. First, they try to silence you with poisoned compliments. You're so smart, but you should be more practical. Then with guilt. Not everyone can be like you. Some of us have to live in the real world. Finally, with ostracism, they simply stop inviting you, including you, considering you part of the group. And you face a brutal choice. You can silence yourself, compress your thoughts, pretend a simplicity you don't feel, become a diluted version of yourself to keep the warmth of belonging. Or you can stay whole, accept the cold of exile, and build a life on the margins where at least you can breathe without masks. Most choose the first path. They call it maturing. Jung would call it betrayal of the soul. Betrayal of the soul is the cost of normalcy, And the brilliant mind pays this cost every day in small transactions. Every time you agree to an idiocy to avoid conflict. Every time you laugh at something that isn't funny to lubricate social interaction. Every time you bite your tongue when you could say something true but inconvenient. Each of these micro-betrayals erodes something essential, until one day you look in the mirror and do not recognize the stranger returning your gaze. That stranger has your face, but has emptied its interior to accommodate others' expectations. It has exchanged authenticity for acceptance. And the bitter paradox is that it doesn't even achieve acceptance. Because people do not accept who you are when you pretend. They accept who you pretend to be. And who you pretend to be is as disposable as any other character in the social comedy. Jung spent years exploring what he called the collective unconscious, that psychic substrate shared by all humanity where universal archetypes dwell. He discovered that beneath the layers of culture, language, and individual beliefs, we all share the same fundamental patterns. The hero, the shadow, the wise one, the trickster. But he also discovered something more disturbing. Most people never consciously access these depths. They live on the surface of their own psyche, completely identified with their ego, with their social character, with the mask they wear before the world. And when someone who has descended into the depths appears, someone who speaks the language of archetypes and symbols, someone who recognizes the universal patterns beneath superficial particularities, that person can no longer effectively communicate with those who have never made that descent. It's as if you inhabit two worlds simultaneously. The superficial world of appearances, where everyone pretends that things are simple, linear, understandable. And the deep world of archetypal forces, where everything is complex, cyclical, paradoxical. You can navigate the first world out of necessity, you can learn its codes and follow its rituals. But your home is in the second world. And that world is lonely because most people don't even know it exists. When you try to talk to them about it, they look confused or scared, as if you were describing an alien dimension. And in a certain sense, you are. Because for those who have never questioned their own thoughts, never examined their own motivations, never faced their own shadows, the deep inner world is as real as a fantasy land. The solitude of the intellect intensifies in the information age. Paradoxically, we have never had more access to knowledge and have never been more fragmented in our thinking. Information flows in relentless torrents, but deep knowledge requires something that digital culture does not provide. Time for digestion, space for contemplation, silence for integration. The brilliant mind needs these elements as the body needs oxygen. But culture treats them as dispensable luxuries, or worse, as symptoms of unproductiveness. You must always be connected, always consuming, always producing, always available. The idea of disconnecting to think, of losing oneself in deep reflection, of spending hours with a single concept until understanding it viscerally, is perceived as self-indulgence or elitism. And here another layer of isolation emerges. Because even among so-called intellectuals, even in spaces supposedly dedicated to deep thought, you find the same game of appearances with more sophisticated vocabulary. You find people who collect references like trophies but never integrate ideas into their being, who quote Jung without having faced their own shadow, who discuss philosophy as an academic exercise without letting philosophical questions tear apart their certainties, who use intellect as a mask, as another form of status, as a tool to feel superior, instead of as a scalpel to dissect themselves. And when you encounter this, when you discover that even the spaces that promise depth are often intellectual theater, loneliness becomes absolute. Because not even among supposed thinkers do you find the authentic thought that your mind longs for. Schopenhauer argued that suffering was the fundamental condition of existence, that the blind will driving all life is an insatiable engine of pain. And the brilliant mind discovers that this is not pessimism, it is description. It sees how desire generates suffering, how satisfaction is momentary before the next desire arises, how there is never rest in the wheel of wanting, obtaining, adapting, and wanting again. But what makes this view especially isolating is that most people do not want to see it. They prefer the narrative that happiness is just around the corner, that the next achievement, the next purchase, the next relationship will finally bring lasting peace. Pointing out the futility of this project does not make you popular. It makes you the one who ruins hope. Although that hope is the opium that keeps people on the wheel of suffering, they could leave if they face the truth. And here is the final trap of brilliant intelligence. Once you see clearly, you cannot choose not to see. It is not a conscious decision that you can reverse. It is a permanent transformation of your perceptual apparatus. It is as if someone taught you to see ultraviolet colors, and now you see a world that others cannot see or imagine. You can close your eyes, but when you open them, there it is. You can distract yourself, but as soon as the distraction ceases, there it is. You can intoxicate yourself, but when you pass the hangover, there it is. Clarity is an unappealable sentence. And the cruelest part is that no one warned you before crossing that threshold. No one told you that the price of deep understanding would be the exile from the comfort of shared ignorance. Jung spoke of the dark night of the soul, those periods where the psyche unravels before being reconstructed at a higher level of integration. But for the perpetually awake mind, the dark night is not a transient episode. It is the usual climate. Because each level of understanding you reach reveals new layers of absurdity, new dimensions of pain, new reasons to question everything you believed was resolved. There is no arrival. There is no moment when you finally understand everything and can rest in certainty. Each answer generates deeper questions. Each solution reveals more fundamental problems. It is a labyrinth that expands as you walk through it, and loneliness comes from walking further inward while everyone else waits at the entrance convinced they have already seen everything. Those who never entered the labyrinth call you elitist when you describe what you have seen. They accuse you of believing that you are better, smarter, more evolved. But they do not understand that it is not a value judgment. It is a description of experience. Someone who has never tasted an apple is not morally inferior to someone who has. They simply had a different experience. But if you try to describe the taste of an apple to someone who has never tried fruit, you will sound as if you are inventing things or bragging about an experience they cannot validate. The difference is that with apples, they could eventually try one. But with certain types of psychological and philosophical understanding, there are no shortcuts. You cannot make someone see what they have seen until they have walked the same path of ruthless self-examination that you walked. And most will not do it, not because they are incapable, but because it hurts too much. It hurts more than most are willing to admit. It hurts to see how much of your personality is social programming. It hurts to recognize how many of your strongest opinions are disguised insecurities. It hurts to accept that your sense of identity is a fragile narrative your brain built to give coherence to a random collection of experiences. It hurts to discover that the things you've sacrificed years of your life for may have never mattered. It hurts to look at your parents and see broken people reproducing their own traumas in you. It hurts to understand that the love you received was always conditioned by your ability to satisfy others' needs. It hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And after a while, you decide it's better not to know, better not to think so deeply, better to keep the lights off in the basements of the psyche. Most make this decision, and you don't blame them, but you couldn't make it. And now you walk with wounds that others never inflicted, understanding demons that others never named. Culture offers anesthetics for this pain. Endless entertainment to occupy every second of potential consciousness. Compulsive consumption to fill voids with things. Superficial relationships to simulate connection without the risk of true intimacy. Simplistic ideologies to replace complex thinking with comforting certainties. Group identities to subsume the individual into the tribe. And all these anesthetics work, to some extent, for those who can believe in them. But the analytical mind sees the mechanism, sees how the TV series is neurologically designed to create addiction, sees how the product promises a transformation that it cannot chemically fulfill, sees how the relationship is built on mutual need rather than genuine appreciation, sees how ideology reduces infinite complexity to binary narratives, sees how group identity requires betraying inconvenient aspects of the individual being. And when you see the mechanism, you cannot fully surrender to the comfort it offers. There is a form of loneliness that transcends the physical or social. It is ontological loneliness, the condition of existing as a separate consciousness in a universe that perhaps has no inherent consciousness. Jung explored this boundary between the individual psyche and something greater, the terrain where the personal dissolves into the transpersonal. But even in those experiences of ego dissolution, of connection with something universal, there is an inevitable return to the individual point of view. And that return is especially painful for those who have seen the alternative. It is like having experienced the absence of absolute loneliness and then being thrown back into the prison of the self. You know there is another possibility, but you cannot sustain it permanently. So you inhabit two exiles: the exile from society due to your depth, and the exile from cosmic unity due to your individuality. You are too aware for the masses and too separate for the whole. And in the midst of these exiles, you build something. Perhaps art that no one fully understands. Perhaps ideas that may be recognized decades after your death. Perhaps simply a life lived with fierce integrity that does not yield to the pressure to conform. Jung called this the realization of the self, that process of making conscious the unconscious, of integrating the shadow, of honoring all aspects of the psyche, instead of identifying only with what is socially acceptable. And the realization of the self is necessarily a solitary project, because no one else can do your psychological work. No one else can face your demons. No one else can integrate your contradictions. At most, they can walk parallel in their own processes of individuation. And if you are lucky, if the universe is generous, perhaps you will find one or two travel companions who speak your language. But even then, each is fundamentally alone in their own process. The question that no one asks but all deep thinkers face in silence is this: was it worth it? Was the knowledge that brought isolation worth it? Was the clarity that cost connection worth it? Was the integrity that demanded loneliness worth it? And the honest answer is that there is no answer, because it was not a rational choice where you weighed costs and benefits before deciding. You were driven by an internal compulsion stronger than conscious will. Your brilliant mind is not a merit you cultivated. It is a condition you inherited or developed due to circumstances you could not fully control. And now that you have it, you cannot return it. You cannot turn off consciousness as if it were a switch. You cannot unlearn what you have learned. You cannot stop seeing what you have seen. So the question is not whether it was worth it. The question is how you inhabit this condition with the greatest dignity possible. And dignity, in this context, is not silent suffering, nor proud isolation. It is the brutal acknowledgement that your mind works in a certain way, and that trying to force it to be different only causes more suffering. It is the acceptance that you will not fully fit into any normal social group, and that this does not make you superior or inferior, only different in ways that matter deeply to your lived experience. It is the understanding that depth has a price, and that this price is non-negotiable with the universe. You can reject depth and live on the surface, but that also has a price, possibly greater. You can embrace depth and accept loneliness, knowing that at least you are being true to your fundamental nature. No option is easy. No option is free of pain. But one allows you to look at yourself in the mirror without contempt. Schopenhauer suggested that the solution to the suffering of existence was a kind of negation of the will, an extinguishing of desire that keeps us in the wheel of pain. But this is impossible for those who live in the mind, because thought itself is a form of desire. The desire to understand, to clarify, to integrate. You cannot think deeply and be free of will. The will is woven into every analysis, every synthesis, every moment of understanding. So the deep thinker is condemned to a particular suffering, the suffering of being unable to stop seeking meaning in a universe that perhaps has none. It is Sisyphus pushing the rock of understanding uphill, knowing it will roll down, and yet unable not to push it again. And he does so alone, because others abandoned the mountain long ago to play in the valley. But there are moments, rare and precious like diamonds in the mud, where you find resonance. Where you read a book written centuries ago and feel that the author is speaking directly to you across time. Where you have a conversation with a stranger and for 2 hours loneliness dissolves because you are finally speaking the full language of your mind without translation or censorship. Where you create something, art, writing, music, that encapsulates something you didn't know how to express. And someone, somewhere, receives it and silently says, yes, this, exactly this. These moments do not erase fundamental loneliness, but they make it bearable. because they remind you that although depth isolates you, it also connects you with an invisible web of minds across time and space that have made the same descent into the depths as you. Jung died alone in many ways. His ideas were misunderstood, simplified, appropriated by mystics who ignored his scientific rigor, and rejected by scientists who ignored his openness to mysticism. He dedicated his life to mapping the human psyche with a depth few have matched, and the reward was being marginalized by the academic establishment and mythologized by followers who did not truly understand his work. But he continued, he wrote, explored, delved deeper into the labyrinth of consciousness, because that was the only thing he could genuinely do. It was not a choice. It was an ontological necessity. And in that necessity lies something almost tragic but also deeply human. Because the brilliant mind, in its solitude, is doing the work that the species needs, but that society does not recognize until it is too late. So you reach the end of this analysis and find yourself where you started, alone. But now loneliness has a name, a texture, a genealogy. Now you understand that it is not a personal defect nor a social failure. It is the inevitable consequence of seeing clearly in a world that prefers fog. It is the price of individuation in a culture that rewards conformity. It is the cost of depth in an era that celebrates surface. And with this understanding, perhaps, just perhaps, loneliness becomes a little less lonely, because at least now you know why you are alone. And that knowledge does not bring you back to the crowd, but anchors you in yourself more firmly. A brilliant mind becomes lonely, not because it wants to, but because it cannot do anything else and remain whole. And integrity, in the end, is the only thing you truly possess. Everything else, relationships, achievements, possessions, can be taken away. But how you inhabit your own consciousness, that is yours until the last breath. And if you have chosen to inhabit that consciousness with brutal honesty, with ruthless curiosity, with rejection of comforting lies, then loneliness is simply the space where you do that work. It is not a prison, it is a workshop. And the work you do there, in the silence that others fear, is the most important work that exists. Becoming fully human instead of functioning as a human fragment that society found useful. The crowd will never understand it. Not because they are less than you, but because they are playing a different game with different rules towards different goals. And that's okay. There must be people who live on the surface, who maintain the social infrastructure, who perpetuate traditions, who find comfort in the conventional. Without them, there would be no society to question. But there must also be people who descend, who question, who refuse to accept easy answers, who endure the loneliness of depth because someone has to do it. Someone has to keep the flame of genuine thought alive, of real questions, of the pursuit that doesn't stop when it becomes uncomfortable. That person is you. And you are alone, not temporarily until you find your tribe, not situationally until circumstances change. You are fundamentally alone because your mind operates on a frequency that most do not tune into. And now, after all this analysis, after dissecting loneliness down to its atomic components, there remains a question you cannot evade. A question no philosopher can answer for you, no psychoanalyst can resolve on your behalf, no book can definitively answer. The question is simple and terrifying. What will you do with this? How will you live now that you know that your brilliance is both your gift and your curse? Will you continue descending into greater depths, knowing that each level takes you further from the possibility of ordinary connection? Or will you try to build bridges, even if fragile, between your inner world and the world of others, accepting that there will always be imperfect translation? Will you take refuge in bitterness, using your intelligence as a shield to justify your isolation? Or will you find the perverse form of compassion that arises when you understand that everyone is trapped in their own perceptual prisons? Only most cannot see the bars. Because here is the truth that Jung never explicitly said, but that permeates all his work. Expanded consciousness is not a destiny, it is a responsibility. Once you see more, you cannot simply live for yourself, as if the vision had not occurred. You carry the weight of knowing things others do not know, of seeing patterns others do not see. And that weight demands something from you. Not necessarily that you share it, because as we have already established, sharing is often impossible or counterproductive. But that you use it, that you allow your deep vision to inform how you move through the world, how you treat others, how you build your life. That you do not waste your gift on resentment or defensive superiority. That you do not use your intelligence as a weapon to hurt those who cannot defend themselves with the same vocabulary. There is an insidious temptation in the brilliant mind. The temptation to turn loneliness into identity, to make isolation a proud refuge, to use deep understanding as an excuse for emotional detachment. It is easy to say that you are alone because you are too intelligent for ordinary people. It is harder to admit that perhaps there are also wounds, fears of intimacy, emotional incapacities that you have rationalized as intellectual superiority. Jung knew this. He spent years confronting his own shadow, recognizing how his brilliance was also a defense, how his immersion in the archetypical was sometimes an escape from the personal. True individuation is not just deepening knowledge. It is integrating that knowledge with all the inconvenient and vulnerable parts of your humanity that you would rather intellectualize than feel. So when you find yourself alone another night, surrounded by books you understand better than people, lost in thoughts that no acquaintance could follow, you have to honestly ask yourself, is this loneliness completely inevitable, or are there parts of it that you choose? Because it's easier than the risk of being misunderstood, rejected, hurt. Are you alone because you are brilliant, or do you use your brilliance to justify being alone? Because the answer, uncomfortable and complex, is probably both. And recognizing this does not diminish the reality of your intellectual isolation, but it adds layers of complexity that a truly deep mind should not ignore in the name of a self-congratulatory narrative of tragic superiority. The brilliant mind in solitude faces an existential bifurcation. One path leads to bitterness, corrosive cynicism, the objectification of all others as NPCs in your private film of intellectual suffering. This path is seductive because it offers the illusion of control. If everyone else is superficial, you maintain your depth as a crown of thorns that makes you special in your pain. But this path ends in a form of psychic death, where you become a caricature of yourself, a living stereotype of the alienated intellectual who has confused their isolation with enlightenment. The other path is more difficult, more humble, more painful in different ways. It requires you to maintain your depth without using it as a wall, to accept solitude without romanticizing it, to see clearly without despising those who see less clearly, to remain vulnerable even when vulnerability has been punished over and over again. This second path is the one Jung attempted to walk with varying successes throughout his life. There is no glory in it. There is no moment of triumph where everyone finally recognizes your genius and your solitude dissolves in deserved adoration. Instead, there is a silent and continuous effort to remain human while inhabiting a consciousness that constantly threatens to distance you from humanity. It is the work of finding compassion when clarity shows you how pathetic human motives can be. It is the work of maintaining tenderness when analysis reveals the cold mechanics behind each warm gesture. It is the work of loving, if you can still love, not despite seeing clearly, but through seeing clearly. To love the tragicomic human condition precisely because you understand its limitations, not because you ignore them. And here is the secret that most analyses of the genius's loneliness omit. Intelligence without wisdom is just a more sophisticated form of stupidity. You can understand all the psychological and social mechanisms. You can deconstruct every interaction down to its algorithmic components. You can see through all illusions and self-deceptions. But if that understanding does not make you more capable of inhabiting your life with something resembling peace, if it does not allow you some form of connection, even if intermittent and partial, if it only turns you into an alienated spectator of your own existence, then your intelligence has turned against you. It has become a disease disguised as sophistication. Wisdom, unlike intelligence, recognizes its own limits. It knows that there are things that cannot be thought about, but only lived. That there are truths that analysis destroys rather than reveals. That sometimes human connection requires temporarily suspending critical consciousness and simply being present, even if that presence is based on shared fictions. Wisdom is what allows you to hold paradoxes without resolving them. That you are hopelessly alone and deeply connected. That life has no inherent meaning and is full of meanings that you create. That everything is absurd, and yet it desperately matters how you live it. Intelligence wants to resolve these paradoxes. Wisdom inhabits them. Jung understood this in his later years. In his memoirs, he reflected on how the journey toward individuation does not end in some transcendent state of pure knowledge. It ends, if it ends at all, in a humble reconciliation with mystery, with the acceptance that you will never fully understand your own psyche, much less the entire reality. That you can explore the labyrinth your whole life, and there will always be uncharted corridors, unnamed shadows, unasked questions. And this acceptance is not defeat. It is liberation. Because when you stop trying to attain complete understanding, when you accept that depth is infinite and your time is finite, something relaxes. The compulsive need to know softens into curiosity. Solitude ceases to be a problem to solve and becomes a condition you inhabit, sometimes with pain, sometimes with serenity, sometimes with both simultaneously. So you reach the edge of the abyss and look down. The abyss of your own consciousness, of your own mortality, of your own cosmic insignificance. And Nietzsche was right. When you look long into the abyss gazes back at you. But what he didn't say is that in that mutual gaze, in that recognition of nothingness that constitutes and surrounds you, there is something strangely liberating. You no longer have to pretend that your life has a cosmic purpose. You no longer have to justify your existence before a universe that is not paying attention. You no longer need to seek validation in crowds that will never understand you. You can simply be, in all your solitary complexity, without apologies and without illusions. And perhaps, just perhaps, in that state of radical acceptance of your existential solitude, you become capable of a different kind of connection. Not the connection based on sharing the same unconsciousness, but the connection between conscious beings who mutually recognize their fundamental loneliness. This form of encounter is rare, but when it happens, when you look into the eyes of another human being and see that they have also walked through their own inner hells, that they have also paid the price of awakening, that they also carry the weight of seeing too much, there is a recognition that goes beyond words. You do not need to explain. You do not need to translate. You are simply together in the shared knowledge that we are all fundamentally alone, and that this shared knowledge is the only true communion possible for those who have crossed certain thresholds. Jung spent a lot of time exploring synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to connect the inner world with the outer world in ways that defy causality. And for the brilliant mind in solitude, synchronicities become vital signals that perhaps, just perhaps, solitude is not the ultimate truth. Perhaps there are more subtle patterns of connection than superficial social interaction. Perhaps when you surrender completely to solitude, when you stop fighting it, when you accept it as the necessary ground of your existence, something changes. Solitude does not disappear, but it transforms. It becomes the space where the most important things happen. Genuine creativity, original thought, the unmediated encounter with your own soul. Because in the end, forced solitude over a brilliant mind has a cruel but necessary purpose. It forces you to find internal resources that you would never have developed if you had been able to disperse in the comfort of easy belonging. It compels you to build such a rich, complex, inhabited inner world that when external loneliness becomes unbearable, you can retreat into that inner world and find enough company in your own thoughts, enough beauty in your own creations, enough meaning in your own exploration. It is not a complete comfort. It never replaces the warmth of genuine human contact. But it is enough to survive, and on good days, it is enough to thrive in ways that those who never knew deep loneliness will never experience. There is a scene that Jung describes in his memoirs, a moment in his old age where he is alone in his tower in Bollingen, working with stone, building with his hands, far from the city and social demands. And at that moment of complete solitude, working in silence, he felt a peace that his entire intellectual life had never given him. The peace of simply being, without an audience, without a purpose beyond the act of creating itself. And this is the final paradox. The brilliant mind seeks complexity, depth, meaning. But sometimes, liberation comes from the simple, the immediate, the concrete. From touching cold stone, from seeing the sun move, from existing without analyzing existence. But you cannot sustain that state for very long. Your mind reactivates, questions again, reanalyzes, and the cycle continues. Depth and surface, solitude and connection, analysis and experience, perpetually oscillating, never finding permanent balance, because permanent balance is another illusion, another fantasy of resolution in a universe that operates through dynamic imbalance. And eventually, you learn that it's not about resolving loneliness. It's about learning to dance with it. Accepting that some days, loneliness is enough company, and other days, it is a bleeding wound. Recognizing that your brilliance is both blessing and curse, and that you cannot separate one from the other without destroying what you fundamentally are. Are you willing to accept this? Can you look at your life, with all its loneliness, with all its misunderstandings, with all its moments of painful alienation, and still say yes to who you are? Can you let go of the fantasy that one day your intelligence will be fully understood, fully appreciated, fully connected with others? Can you inhabit the truth that you will die with parts of yourself that no one ever fully knew, with thoughts that you never successfully translated into human language, with depths that you explored completely alone? And can you do all this without becoming a bitter martyr of your own intelligence, without using your loneliness as a weapon against a world that is simply playing a different game than yours? Because a brilliant mind in solitude is not a tragedy that needs to be redeemed. It is a condition that needs to be inhabited with the greatest possible integrity. It is the price some pay to see beyond comforting narratives. And yes, it is a high price. But the alternative, deliberately blinding your own ability to see, betraying your own depth for the illusion of belonging, living your whole life as a compressed version of who you really are, that price is impossible to pay for someone who has already tasted clarity. Once you have seen, you cannot unsee. Once you have thought deeply, you cannot return to superficial thinking without feeling like you are dying slowly. So, you find yourself here, at the end of this monologue, that perhaps no one else but you fully understands. Just again, but maybe only in a different way. With a more detailed map of your loneliness. With a more precise language for your isolation. With a deeper understanding of why brilliance and loneliness are so intimately intertwined. And the question that echoes in the silence after all these words is not whether you can escape loneliness. The question is whether you can transform it from prison into sanctuary, from curse into vocation, from wound into the source of your deepest strength. The answer lives in the space between your thoughts, in the exact moment before your analytical mind turns experience into concept. It lives in your ability to maintain your depth without being overwhelmed, to exercise your brilliance without separating yourself from your fundamental humanity. It lives in your decision, renewed each day, to stay awake in a sleeping world without despising those who sleep, to walk alone without turning solitude into a complete identity, to see clearly without losing the capacity for wonder altogether. Can you do this? Can you be brilliant and lonely and human and vulnerable simultaneously? Can you accept that your mind has exiled you from the tribe without building a new imaginary tribe where you are the misunderstood hero? Can you let go of the stories you tell yourself about your loneliness and simply feel it directly, without narrative mediation? And can you, amidst all this, find moments of genuine laughter, simple pleasure, and inexplicable gratitude for existing, even though existence has no inherent meaning? These are the questions that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Not because they have definitive answers, but because they are the right questions for a mind that refuses to settle for easy answers. And in the way you inhabit them, in how you dance with these impossibilities, you define who you are beyond your intelligence, beyond your loneliness, beyond all the labels that psychology and philosophy can offer. You define your unique humanity in the only place where it can be defined, in the silent intimacy of your own consciousness, alone with itself, gazing into the abyss that is simultaneously the source of all meaning and the evidence that no meaning endures.